Unaware his wife kept a $500 million inheritance secret, husband abandons her at the hospital to marry his rich billionaire boss. What she did next. He didn't just leave. He walked out of a pale, sterile hospital room while the heart monitor still beat beside his wife's bed, answered a call from his billionaire boss, and never came back. That afternoon, Elena Harris steadied her breath as the nurse adjusted her IV. She had collapsed from severe stress after discovering the true depth of his betrayal. Her husband Daniel had promised, "I'm right outside," but the sliding doors whispered shut and his shadow disappeared down the corridor with his phone pressed to his ear. By nightfall, news alerts lit up every screen in the waiting room. Tech CEO Victoria Hale marries former employee Daniel Harris in private ceremony. He thought he had traded a quiet life for power, status, and rooms full of mirrors and glass. He thought Elena would fade into silence, too weak to stand, too soft to fight. What he never knew was this: the woman he abandoned kept a locked folder at home and a promise she made to her father. Inside that folder, a fortune spread across trusts, real estate, and companies, $500 million hidden in plain sight, protected by a name he never bothered to ask about. While Daniel posed for photos under chandeliers, Elena's phone buzzed in the hospital drawer with a single message from the only person who knew the truth. "When you are ready, the papers are ready." She closed her eyes, not for sleep, for choice. This is not only a story about a man who left a hospital room. It is about what happens when the person written off as fragile becomes the one who writes the ending. Dear viewers, if you watch without subscribing, her voice is easy to ignore again. Click subscribe to stand with Elena, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The next sound you'll hear is not a wedding bell, it's a gavel. The sound of a kettle whistling filled the air, sharp, rising, almost urgent. Elena Harris moved quickly to lift it off the stove before it screamed any louder. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the rush of her morning routine. The kitchen was small, bright, and tidy, every detail neat and intentional, the way she liked her world to be. It was 6:30 a.m. Sunlight spilled through soft white curtains, painting gold lines across the wooden counter where 2 coffee mugs waited. One mug read, "Good things take time," in faded letters. The other was plain, chipped on one side, Daniel's. She filled both with care, adding just a touch of sugar to his, the way he used to like it when they were still new. Elena Harris, 32 years old, ran a small art nonprofit from home, a project that helped underprivileged children find expression through painting and storytelling. She had inherited the old building from her father, a quiet philanthropist who had built a fortune without anyone ever noticing. He had passed away 3 years ago, leaving Elena something that would change any life: $500 million in trusts, real estate, and stock portfolios spread across the world. But no one knew, not even her husband. Flashback. The memory came back in quiet flashes: the heavy oak office, the steady voice of her father's lawyer, Mr. Raines. "Your father left specific instructions," he had said, sliding a folder toward her. "You are to keep this inheritance private. He believed love is truest when money cannot touch it." She remembered how her hands had shaken as she signed the papers, agreeing to the confidentiality clause. "He wanted you to have this quietly," Mr. Raines had added, "to live freely, not dependently." And she had believed that. She didn't want her marriage to become a transaction. She wanted Daniel to love her, not her father's empire. Now, as Daniel walked into the kitchen, straightening his tie, she smiled up at him. "Your coffee's ready," she said softly. He didn't look at her, just checked his watch. "Running late. Big presentation today," he muttered. He grabbed the mug, took one sip, and set it down half full. Elena watched the small action like it meant something larger. The same every morning. He'd rush, leave, and forget the tiny world they once built together. She smiled anyway, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You'll do great," she said, her voice carrying that kind of gentle faith only love can hold. Daniel glanced at her briefly, then at the folder on the table filled with her art program plans. "You still doing that kids project?" he asked, already reaching for his briefcase. "Yes," she answered, hiding the flicker of sadness. "It's growing, actually. We just got funding for—" Good, good, he cut in. Anyway, Victoria's expecting me early. That name, Victoria, always made her chest tighten. Victoria Hale, his boss, the billionaire CEO he'd started working for last year. A woman Elena had met once at a company event. Elegant, sharp, intimidating. She had smiled at Daniel in a way that didn't belong to professionalism. Elena noticed then, but she said nothing. She trusted him. Daniel kissed her forehead quickly, a gesture that used to mean affection, but now felt like a habit. "Don't wait up," he said, grabbing his car keys. As the door shut behind him, silence filled the kitchen. Elena stood there, staring at the steam curling from his untouched coffee. She picked up the cup, ran her finger along the chip in the rim, and sighed. She walked to the small bookshelf by the window and opened the bottom drawer. Inside, neatly wrapped in brown paper, was that same sealed folder from 3 years ago. The inheritance papers. She touched it like a secret too powerful to speak aloud. Her reflection in the window caught her eye. Tired but graceful. Her father's words echoed faintly in her head. "Use it only when your heart tells you the truth." She smiled faintly, unaware that her heart would soon be tested beyond anything she imagined. Outside, Daniel's car engine roared, fading into the distance. She didn't see him glance at his phone, a message flashing across the screen from VH. "Don't forget dinner tonight, just you and me." Elena's phone buzzed softly on the counter, a notification from her nonprofit reminding her about an art exhibition for the weekend. She silenced it, picked up Daniel's half-finished coffee, and poured it down the sink. The sound was long and hollow. Her eyes lifted toward the morning light breaking through the curtains. For the first time, she didn't feel comforted by it. She looked at the clock, whispering to herself, "He's just busy. That's all." Then quieter, almost like a secret meant only for her reflection. "Tomorrow maybe he'll come home early." But deep inside, a small chill passed through her chest. She had been ignoring the feeling for months, a knot of anxiety that tightened every time he mentioned Victoria's name. She pushed it down. Trust was a choice, she told herself. Elena didn't know it, but that simple, gut-wrenching choice to trust him was about to be the last one she'd ever make in this marriage. The sound of clinking glasses echoed through the tall, glass-walled office. The city lights shimmered below like a sea of broken stars. But inside, Daniel Harris was focused only on one reflection, his own in the office window. His tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled up, and the clock on the wall read 8:47 p.m. He was still there. The door opened behind him. A confident, rhythmic sound of heels crossed the marble floor. Victoria Hale entered the room like a quiet storm, elegant, commanding, every gesture intentional. She was in her mid-40s but carried the authority of someone who never heard the word no. Her reputation as a self-made billionaire and CEO of Hale Industries made her both feared and admired. To Daniel, she was the life he wanted, glamorous, decisive, untouchable. "You stayed late again," she said, setting down 2 glasses of wine. "That's what I like about you. You work as if this place belongs to you." Daniel smiled slightly, pride flickering across his face. "I'm just trying to make sure everything's perfect for the investor's presentation." Victoria leaned closer, handing him a glass. "Perfection doesn't exist, Daniel. Control does, and you have the right instinct for it." Their eyes met longer than they should have. For a moment, the air between them thickened with unspoken tension. Daniel looked away first, pretending to check his notes, but the faint smile on her lips said she noticed. "You're wasted in marketing," she continued. "You have leadership written all over you. You just need to stop limiting yourself." "How do you mean?" he asked. Victoria sipped her wine, tilting her head. "You play small. You still think loyalty will take you further than ambition. That's adorable and dangerous." The words landed deep. Daniel forced a laugh but couldn't hide how it stirred him. Ambition. That was what he'd been chasing since the day he realized Elena's world moved slower than his. She was kindness and quiet mornings. He was hunger and noise. Victoria reached for her phone and tapped something quickly. Daniel's phone buzzed on the desk a moment later. He glanced down. A message glowed on his screen. "You deserve someone who sees your worth. V." He looked up at her, confused but intrigued. She smiled. "Just a reminder," she said lightly, turning away toward the window. Cut to Elena at home, sitting at the dinner table. The food had gone cold an hour ago. She had tried calling Daniel twice, left a soft voice message the third time. "Hey, dinner's ready. I know you're busy. Just wanted to hear your voice." Her tone was sweet, but the silence that followed it felt heavy. The candle she had lit melted halfway down, flickering low. She checked the clock, 9:26 p.m., and smiled faintly as if reassuring herself that love was just running late tonight. She looked around their modest living room. Photos lined the wall, her and Daniel smiling on the beach, her father standing proudly beside them on their wedding day. Those smiles felt like they belonged to someone else now. The front door opened suddenly. Daniel stepped in, smelling faintly of expensive perfume and red wine. His tie was missing. His shirt was open at the neck. "You're late," Elena said softly, rising to meet him. "Yeah," he muttered, setting his briefcase down. "Meeting ran long. Investors, presentations, all that." She nodded, trying to believe him. "I kept dinner warm." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "I'm not hungry." Something in the way he said it made her heart sink. But she didn't press. She just reached for his jacket to hang it up, and as she did, his phone lit up again in her hand. A single line glowed across the screen. "Good night, partner." Elena froze. The phone dimmed. She said nothing, just handed him his jacket and smiled faintly. "Long night?" Daniel looked at her quickly, studying her face, but she wasn't accusing. That almost hurt him more. "Yeah," he said finally, voice low. "You wouldn't understand the pressure." She looked away, setting the plates on the counter. "You're right," she whispered. "Maybe I wouldn't." He didn't notice the exhaustion in her voice. He didn't see the way her shoulders sank when he walked past her to the bedroom without saying goodnight. Flashback. Elena remembered their early days, Daniel working late then too, but coming home with takeout, laughing, apologizing, saying, "You're my calm, Lena. Don't ever change." That Daniel was gone. Somewhere between ambition and approval, he had changed, and she was watching it happen one cold dinner at a time. Back in the kitchen, she gathered the untouched plates. Her reflection glimmered in the dark window. She spoke softly to herself. "Everyone sees worth in numbers. I saw it in heart." A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. She wiped it away quickly, straightening up, forcing calm. On the couch, Daniel's phone buzzed again. He was already asleep in the bedroom, but the vibration continued until the screen glowed once more. Elena hesitated, then stepped closer, her pulse quickening. She wasn't snooping. She was surviving. She picked up the phone and glanced at the message. "Tomorrow night, dinner again. Don't bring your ring." Elena's fingers trembled. The silence in the room became deafening. The message wasn't just an invitation. It was an execution. It confirmed every dark, creeping suspicion she had suppressed for months. As she stared at the words, her breath hitched. A sharp pain bloomed in her chest, radiating outwards. The room began to tilt. The message on the screen blurred as her vision tunneled. She gripped the counter, the phone slipping from her fingers, her whisper barely carrying, "He's not." The last thing she felt before the darkness took her was the cold, hard tile of the kitchen floor. The world returned in sharp, painful flashes. A siren, the smell of antiseptic, the feeling of movement. When Elena opened her eyes, she was on a stretcher, white lights above her, flashing in rhythm with the thud of her heart. She saw Daniel beside her for a second, his face pale, his eyes wide. He looked scared, almost guilty. She reached for his hand. "I'm here," he said quickly. "The neighbor found you. You collapsed. Don't talk. You're going to be fine." Her eyelids fluttered as she tried to stay conscious. Hospital corridors, bright, sterile, and echoing. Nurses rushed by as doctors gave orders. A doctor met them at the ER entrance. "What happened?" the doctor asked Daniel. "I don't know. I found her on the floor when I woke up. She's been under a lot of stress," Daniel stammered, his words fast and jumbled. The doctor nodded. "We'll take it from here." Daniel followed the gurney into the emergency area, his phone buzzing again and again in his pocket. He hesitated before pulling it out. The name glowing on the screen made his jaw tighten. Victoria Hale. He silenced it, but it rang again, louder this time. Mr. Harris, a nurse said sharply, you need to wait here. He nodded, distracted, pacing back and forth. Then the phone buzzed again, and this time the message flashed across the screen. Need you right now. Urgent. Come to the private hangar. Don't let me down. He stared at it. His breathing quickened. Logic flashed across his mind. Victoria was about to leave for the investors' retreat. She had hinted at promoting him to executive partner if he proved he could be reliable under pressure. This was his chance. He looked back toward the ER doors. He could hear Elena's faint voice somewhere inside. The nurse called out, Sir, she's stable for now, but we'll need your authorization to run more tests. The doctor suspects acute stress failure, but I'll be right back, Daniel interrupted, stepping away. Sir, we'll need you to stay. But the automatic doors had already closed behind him. Elena, on the hospital bed, hooked to monitors, her breathing shallow. A nurse named Clara, young, kind-eyed and soft-spoken, adjusted her IV. You're safe now, Clara said gently. You collapsed from severe exhaustion and stress. Your husband went to handle some paperwork, but he'll be back soon. Elena smiled weakly. He never leaves my side, she whispered, almost convincing herself. Hours passed. The clock on the wall ticked from 7:45 p.m. to midnight. The fluorescent light hummed quietly. Clara returned, checking her chart. Elena tried to sit up, but the movement sent a jolt through her body. Has Daniel called? She asked. The nurse hesitated. No, ma'am. But he left a message with reception. Said something came up. Elena's expression didn't change. She just blinked, as if her mind was trying to protect her from believing it. Something came up, she repeated softly. Her hand went to her chest, feeling her heart race faster. 2 weeks earlier. Daniel sitting in a bar with his old college friend Chris. The place was half empty, shadows stretching across their table. Victoria wants me on her leadership board, Daniel had said, trying to sound casual. She wants you or your work? Chris asked, raising an eyebrow. Daniel laughed. Both, maybe. You're married, Dan. You don't understand. This could make me. Elena will be fine. She's stable, simple. She won't even notice. Chris shook his head. You'll regret this if she finds out. Daniel had only smirked. Elena's too naive to ever find out. The beeping of the heart monitor brought Elena back. Her eyes glistened, but she refused to cry. She turned her head slightly toward the table beside her. Her phone lay there, placed in the drawer by the nurse. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. She hesitated, the way a faithful heart hesitates before looking for proof. The screen came alive with a new message notification from a gossip site she didn't remember following. Elena, what is this? It was a message from her friend Megan, forwarding a link. Elena's heart sank. She clicked it. The world around her faded to static. It was a celebrity gossip alert, flashing across her screen. Billionaire CEO Victoria Hale spotted at private hangar with married exec Daniel Harris. Sources say the two are eloping to an unknown location. Attached was a grainy photo, Daniel smiling, helping Victoria onto a private jet. Elena's lips parted. No sound came out. Her hands shook so violently that the phone slipped to the floor. Clara entered the room again, holding a clipboard. Mrs. Harris, we need to update your emergency contact. Your husband's number doesn't seem to be active at the moment. Do you have someone else? Elena stared at her, the words slow to register. He left? Clara hesitated. He said he had something urgent. I'm sure he'll be back soon. But the nurse's soft tone betrayed the truth. No one leaves like that if they plan to return. The monitor beside Elena beeped faster. She turned her face to the side, tears finally breaking through. I waited, she whispered. I always wait. The nurse quietly replaced Daniel's name on the contact form, writing NA beside emergency family member. Elena watched the letters being written, and it felt like watching her marriage erased in real time. In the hallway, Clara picked up Elena's phone from the floor and placed it in her drawer, unaware that inside it held the very evidence that would soon fuel Elena's silent, methodical rise. A car door closed gently. Are you sure you'll be all right, Elena? I can have my assistant stay. Elena turned to the man in the passenger seat. Mr. Raines, her father's lawyer, looked at her with concern. His was the only number she knew by heart. "I'll be fine, thank you, Mr. Raines. I need to be home." "The hospital should have kept you," he said sternly. "They said I was stable. It was just stress," she whispered, stepping out of the car. "Stress is a powerful thing," he replied. "Call me, immediately, if you need anything." She nodded and watched him drive away before turning to her home. The door creaked open into silence. The air smelled stale. Cold coffee, untouched food, a vase of wilted flowers on the counter. Her steps were slow, careful, as if she were afraid the house itself might shatter if she moved too quickly. The living room lights were off. Only the pale morning sun filtered through the curtains, landing on the dining table, where something white and sharp broke the stillness. A stack of papers, placed neatly beside a half-empty mug. Her heartbeat quickened. She moved closer. Her name was printed on the top page in bold letters. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Her hands froze midair. The world tilted again. She scanned down the page. Daniel Harris, petitioner. At the bottom, his signature. The lawyer's stamp. The space for her signature was blank. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She stared at the papers for a long time. Her mind blank, her heart caught between disbelief and pain so raw it almost felt unreal. Her fingers brushed the ink, as if touching his name might wake her from a dream. But the words didn't vanish. They stayed, black and final. On the table beside the papers was Daniel's wedding ring, his real one, the one she'd bought him when they couldn't afford much. He hadn't even bothered to take it with him. She sank into the chair, her breath catching in her throat. She stared at the photo on her own phone's lock screen. Daniel in a suit, smiling beside Victoria, his arm around her waist. The gossip alert had updated. Breaking news. Tech CEO, Victoria Hale marries. Former employee, Daniel Harris in private ceremony. CEO, Victoria Hale marries former employee, Daniel Harris in private ceremony. The article went on. Sources confirm the two have been in a private relationship for several months. The ceremony was held overseas. Elena's knees gave out. She sank into the chair, clutching the phone. Outside, laughter drifted from the neighbors next door. Someone saying, "Can you believe it? That's her husband, the one on the news." Another voice, "She must be devastated." Elena didn't move. She just stared at nothing, her eyes glassy. Her reflection in the dark TV screen looked like a stranger's, a quiet, empty version of herself. The clock ticked loudly. The fridge hummed. Every sound felt louder, crueler. Then something inside her broke, not in noise, but in silence. She stood up slowly, the phone still in her hand, and walked toward the bedroom. The bed was perfectly made, as if waiting for someone who would never return. On the dresser sat a small frame photo, her and Daniel on their wedding day. The glass had cracked at some point, right across his face. Years earlier, they'd sat in this same room, legs intertwined, planning their future. She'd told him softly, "I want a child one day, but not until you're ready." He'd smiled, brushing her cheek. "We'll build everything together, okay? Everything." They had kissed, full of hope and promises. The hospital bed, the same sterile room where she had lost that future 6 months ago. The miscarriage, the quiet grief she had endured alone while he stayed late at meetings. She remembered the nurse's soft apology, the doctor's gentle words. Sometimes it's stress, sometimes the body's way of saying stop. Now sitting on the edge of her bed, she understood. She hadn't lost just a child. She'd lost the illusion that love was safe. Her phone buzzed again, a notification from a gossip site. Victoria Hale and Daniel Harris seen boarding private jet for honeymoon. She laughed once, softly, the sound dry and hollow. Then she stopped because laughter hurt. For a long moment, she just sat there, the house around her dim and still. Then she rose, calm and precise, as if every movement had already been decided deep within her. She walked to the closet, reached behind the row of coats and pulled out a small metal key. It belonged to the safe in her father's study, a safe she hadn't opened since the day of the funeral. The air in the room shifted. Down the hall, she knelt before the safe and slid the key in. The click echoed like thunder in the quiet house. Inside were old family papers, sealed envelopes, and one brown folder with her name embossed across the top. Elena Harris, Private Holdings. Her hands hesitated for only a second before she lifted it out. She placed it gently on the desk and opened it. Inside lay the documents from her inheritance. Company shares, trust accounts, bank information, the life she had hidden away to protect love from greed. Her eyes moved across the papers, but this time there was no hesitation, no fear, just stillness, clarity. A line of sunlight broke through the curtain, landing across her face. It illuminated the calm in her expression, the kind of calm that comes right before a storm. She closed the folder slowly, her gaze fixed on nothing in particular. Then almost to herself, she whispered, "If love was blind," her voice was steady now, her eyes unblinking, "then justice won't be." The sound of the folder snapping shut echoed through the room. She picked up her phone and dialed the number she knew by heart. "Mr. Rains," she said, her voice perfectly level. "It's Elena. I'm ready to open the new accounts." The air inside the law office was cold and still, too still. The heavy ticking of a wall clock echoed like a countdown. Elena Harris sat across a wide mahogany desk, her hands clasped tightly together. The fluorescent lights above hummed faintly, their glow cutting through the silence like a blade. Mr. Rains, a silver-haired man in his late 50s, adjusted his glasses and studied her face. He had known Elena since she was a child, when her father first brought her to the office to learn the value of quiet power. He had seen her cry when her father died, and now he saw something new, an unsettling calm. "Elena," he said softly, sliding a stack of papers toward her, "are you sure about this? Once we begin, there's no going back." She didn't hesitate. Her voice was steady. "He made his choice. Now it's time I make mine." Rains nodded slowly. He could hear something in her tone, resolve, not anger. "Then we'll do this carefully," he said. "We'll move everything into the new structure you've approved. No one will trace it back to you." He opened a leather folder and pointed to the first page. E.H. Holdings Incorporated. The name gleamed in bold black ink. "With this," he continued, "you'll have full control over your assets, but under anonymity. You can invest, buy, or sell as an independent entity. It's legal, strategic, and subtle." Elena took the pen from his hand. "Subtle is exactly what I need." She signed her name in slow, deliberate strokes. Every loop of the pen felt like a heartbeat calming itself down. It wasn't revenge she wanted, it was balance, justice. As Rains reviewed the documents, she looked around the office. Her father's portrait still hung on the far wall. His familiar smile looked back at her, steady and proud. She could almost hear his voice in her head. "Power doesn't shout, Elena. It whispers, and the world listens." Her throat tightened. For the first time since the hospital, she allowed herself to breathe deeply. The storm inside her was quiet now. Rains glanced up from the paperwork. "You know," he said gently, "you could simply move on, live comfortably, let the past stay buried." Elena met his gaze. "Mr. Rains, men like Daniel and women like Victoria don't stop when you walk away. They stop when the truth catches up to them." Rains studied her expression and nodded once. He'd seen that look before, on her father's face when he dismantled entire corporations without ever raising his voice. Rains clicked a few keys on his laptop and turned the screen toward her. "Here are the companies currently under Hale Industries Network," he said. "Small acquisitions, tech firms, client data handlers. Many of them have weak compliance structures. That's where their empire leaks." Elena leaned forward, scanning the screen. "I want E.H. Holdings to begin buying into the smaller ones, quietly, no attention. Start with the ones tied to data management." He frowned slightly. "You're planning to expose them?" "Not yet," she said, her tone like glass, smooth, sharp. "They broke laws they thought no one would notice. We're going to find the evidence they hid." Rains nodded, understanding her angle. "You'll use the data trail. If Daniel rerouted client accounts under Victoria's authorization, that's corporate misconduct. As the new anonymous owner of their partners, our auditors will have a legal right to review the books. We can document everything, legally." Elena smiled faintly for the first time. Let truth do the work. The office fell silent again as he prepared the last set of files. Elena's fingers brushed a framed photo on the desk, an old picture of her father and her, taken the day her art center opened. She whispered softly, "You taught me patience, Papa. I'm finally ready to use it." Rains placed the final document before her. "Your new company is officially active," he said. "Every transaction will trace back to EH Holdings, not to you. Within a week, you'll have controlling interest in 4 of Hale's smaller partners." Elena stood slowly, straightening her coat. Her reflection in the glass window looked different, still gentle but now unshakable. She turned to Rains and said quietly, "I won't destroy him. I'll just let truth do it for me." As she reached the door, Rains called out, "Elena, what will you do when the truth comes out?" She paused, her hand on the handle, the faintest trace of a smile on her lips. "Then," she said, "I'll be ready to watch him see who I really am." Outside the window, the rain had started to fall for the first time in weeks, soft at first, then steady, like the world itself was beginning to cleanse. Unseen by Elena, across town, Daniel sat in a dimly lit restaurant beside Victoria, laughing as their waiter poured champagne. Neither of them knew that the first company under Hale's name had just changed ownership, quietly, and neither of them knew that inside that first company, a mid-level accountant, terrified of Victoria but desperate to do the right thing, was about to discover he had a new, anonymous boss. The applause was thunderous. Camera flashes exploded across the vast tech conference hall as Daniel Harris and Victoria Hale stood side by side under bright white lights. Behind them, the giant LED screen displayed the words, "Hale Industries Global Future Summit." Victoria looked every bit the billionaire visionary, poised, confident, untouchable. Daniel stood half a step behind her, smiling at the cameras, his chest swelling with pride. This was everything he had ever wanted: power, attention, validation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria announced into the microphone, her voice calm and commanding, "we're proud to unveil our newest expansion, an international partnership program that will redefine corporate data security." The crowd erupted in applause again. Daniel stepped forward to continue, his voice echoing through the hall. "We've worked day and night to make sure this project sets new standards for transparency and trust." He stopped mid-sentence. The massive screen behind them flickered once, then again. The Hale Industries logo glitched, replaced by a loading icon. Confused murmurs rippled through the audience. Victoria turned toward the technician booth with a sharp glare. "What's going on?" she hissed under her breath. The screen blinked back on, but this time, it wasn't the company's logo, it was an email. From Victoria Hale to Daniel Harris. "Let's quietly rewrote the contracts to my husband's shell company. No one will notice if we filter the reports before audit." VH. The room froze. Gasps filled the air. A sea of phones lifted, recording every second. The text stayed on the screen for several long, unbearable moments before more emails began to appear. Internal chains, payment transfers, confidential attachments. Each one linking Daniel and Victoria to corporate misconduct, fraud, and data tampering. Victoria's face went pale. "Cut the feed," she snapped. "Now!" Technicians scrambled, but the system refused to respond. One screen shut down, only for another to light up with more evidence. Screenshots, transaction records, personal messages. Daniel's heart pounded. He turned to her. "What is this?" She glared at him. "You tell me. You're the one handling the accounts. Are you insane? You approved every—" "Stop talking," she hissed. The audience had gone from confused to electrified. Reporters whispered to one another. Cameras zoomed in. Microphones recorded every word. Finally, the screens went black. Silence. Only the sound of Daniel's heavy breathing and the faint clicking of cameras remained. Victoria regained her composure first. She turned to the crowd with a brittle smile. "We seem to be experiencing a technical interruption," she said, forcing calm. "Please bear with us." Before she could finish, a journalist shouted from the audience, "Ms. Hale, are these emails real?" Another yelled, "Mr. Harris, did you use company funds for personal profit?" Victoria's mask cracked. She grabbed Daniel's arm hard. You fix this, she whispered through clenched teeth. I didn't do this, he snapped back. Yes, you did, she spat, and I'll make sure everyone knows it. She stormed off the stage, her heels striking the floor like gunshots. Elena Harris sat at home, watching the live broadcast from her laptop. The room was quiet, the only light coming from the screen. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. Her expression was still, calm, almost detached. On the coffee table sat a cup of tea and an open folder of printed documents, the same ones her lawyer, Mr. Raines, had gathered from the whistleblowers inside Hale Industries. Whistleblowers who, upon learning their small data firm was now owned by an anonymous and protective holding company, finally felt safe to leak their copies of the evidence. Everything had been done legally. Through proper channels, she had simply let truth find its way to light. She leaned back, closing the folder, her voice quiet as she spoke to herself. I told you, Daniel, truth doesn't need help. It only needs time. Security guards surrounded Daniel as reporters swarmed the stage. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out with shaking hands. New message. Unknown number. You should have read the fine print. He froze. The color drained from his face. Around him, chaos erupted. Victoria arguing with lawyers, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. But Daniel could only stare at the message glowing on his screen. He knew that tone, that calm precision, that silence between words. It was Elena. As Daniel's trembling fingers closed around the phone, the live broadcast ended abruptly. Across town, a courthouse light flicked on. A clerk placed a sealed folder on a judge's desk, E.H. Holdings versus Hale Industries. And somewhere in the dark, Elena's quiet war had just become official. The gavel struck hard against the sound block. Court is now in session, the judge announced, his voice echoing through the packed courtroom. Cameras clicked softly in the back row, reporters whispering like wind through leaves. Every seat was filled. The world had come to watch Hale Industries fall. At the plaintiff's table sat Elena Harris, calm, composed, dressed in a tailored black suit that carried no hint of revenge, only quiet strength. Beside her was Mr. Raines, her father's longtime lawyer, now her sword in silence. Papers were neatly stacked before them, evidence sealed, time-stamped, undeniable. Across the room, Daniel sat stiffly beside Victoria Hale. His jaw was tight, his tie crooked, his hands trembling slightly. Victoria looked furious, her usual confidence replaced with a brittle calm. Her legal team whispered rapidly, sliding documents back and forth, but she barely heard them. She couldn't take her eyes off Elena. For the first time since the hospital, Elena's eyes met Daniel's. There was no hatred there, only a hollow kind of peace. That unnerved him more than anger ever could. The judge adjusted his glasses. Case 1412, E.H. Holdings versus Hale Industries. Plaintiff alleges breach of fiduciary duty, corporate theft, and manipulation of client data for personal profit. Gas rippled through the courtroom. Victoria leaned toward her lawyer. We can shut this down. There's no proof those transfers. Actually, Ms. Hale, the judge interrupted, there is. Mr. Raines rose smoothly. Your Honor, E.H. Holdings, as the new majority owner of 3 of Hale Industries' key data partners, conducted a legal audit. We are here to present those findings. Permission to submit Exhibit A, internal Hale Industries emails confirming unauthorized fund rerouting under the direction of Daniel Harris and Victoria Hale. The clerk carried the folder forward. The judge examined the papers for a long, heavy moment. Then his eyes lifted. Proceed. Raines turned to the projection screen beside him. With a click, the first email appeared for everyone to see. From Daniel Harris to Victoria Hale funds successfully rerouted. Easiest transfer I've ever done. Once your board approves, I'll finalize through the shell account. Murmurs exploded through the courtroom. Cameras flashed. Victoria's lawyer stood quickly. Objection. This could have been fabricated. Raines clicked again. Another email appeared. From Victoria Hale to Daniel Harris Perfect. Keep it quiet. Once this goes through, your name will be added as partner. The room went silent. The words glowed across the screen, burning their image into every witness's memory. The judge turned to Victoria. Is that your email address, Ms. Hale? She hesitated. Yes, But, and your signature here. It could have been. Before she could finish, Raines held up another file. Your Honor, we also have transaction records showing the transfers were deposited into a company owned by Mr. Harris, registered under a false identity 6 months prior. The documentation was verified by independent auditors. Daniel's face went pale. That's not true, he shouted. Victoria told me. Victoria slammed her hand on the table. I told you to file legitimate transfers, not. The judge banged the gavel. Order. The room fell silent again. Raines continued, unshaken. The final exhibit, Your Honor, is the one that proves intent to defraud not just our client, but Hale Industries' own shareholders. He presented a single digitally signed document. Raines gave a small nod. The case had already won itself. Then quietly, one of Victoria's lawyers leaned toward her and whispered something urgent. She frowned. What? He repeated. He forged your signature. Victoria's entire body went still. What did you say? The lawyer pushed a single page toward her. A digital copy of a document Daniel had filed, bearing her forged signature authorizing the final largest transfer. Her eyes widened. Slowly, she turned to Daniel. You forged my name? She hissed. Daniel stammered. I had to. You said to finalize. Her voice cracked through the courtroom. You idiot! Do you realize what you've done? Every camera caught the moment. Victoria's mask shattering, Daniel shrinking beside her, the truth slicing through the empire they built on lies. The judge struck his gavel again. Enough! The court will recess for 30 minutes while evidence is reviewed. As the room erupted in noise, Daniel turned toward Elena, desperate. Elena, please, tell them I didn't mean to. She looked at him with quiet eyes. You meant every choice that brought you here. Security moved between them as the reporters surged forward. Reflection and transition. Elena sat down again, exhaling slowly. Her hands trembled, not from anger, but from release. For years, she'd loved a man she didn't truly know. Now she saw him clearly, and that was enough. Raines leaned toward her. It's over, he said quietly. But Elena shook her head slightly. Not yet. Her gaze shifted to Victoria, who sat frozen, face drained of color. Elena's voice lowered, almost to herself. The truth always takes everyone it touches. As the judge exited the courtroom, a clerk hurried in with a new folder marked Federal Fraud Inquiry, Hale Industries. Elena didn't know it yet, but this trial was only the beginning, and before the week ended, someone would lose far more than money. The noise was deafening. Flashes from hundreds of cameras burst like lightning across the press hall. Reporters shouted questions over one another, voices sharp with urgency and triumph. On the stage stood Victoria Hale, no longer radiant, no longer in control. Her once commanding posture had hardened into rage. She slammed her hand on the podium. I have nothing to hide, she snapped, her voice cracking slightly. The investigation proved that Daniel Harris acted alone. He manipulated data, forged documents, and betrayed the company that trusted him. The crowd erupted again. Questions flew. Are you divorcing him? Did he really steal millions? Was the marriage a cover-up? Victoria raised her hand for silence, though her trembling betrayed her calm. Yes, she said bitterly, her words slicing through the room. The marriage is over. I was foolish enough to believe a man who promised loyalty. He was nothing more than a liar and an opportunist. Gasps and camera clicks filled the room. Daniel's photo flashed on the giant screens behind her. The man once celebrated as a corporate prodigy, now branded Hale Industries Scandal Architect. Outside the hall, Daniel stood behind a pillar, watching the broadcast live on a wall-mounted screen. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. Every word from Victoria echoed like thunder in his skull. He whispered under his breath, She's turning everything on me. But the words sounded weak even to himself. He stumbled out into the cold afternoon air. His phone buzzed with notifications, messages from journalists, former colleagues, even friends who no longer wanted to be seen with him. Your accounts are frozen. The board terminated your position effective immediately. Vacate the company residence within 72 hours. He scrolled faster, desperate, until he reached the name he hadn't called in months. Elena. He pressed call. The line rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. Her voice, calm and kind, filled his ear. Hi, you've reached Elena. Please leave a message. The generic professional tone hit him harder than an accusation. He was just another call she would ignore. Daniel lowered the phone slowly. His chest tightened, and for the first time, he realized he was truly alone. Memories hit like waves. Elena laughing softly at dinner, lighting candles even when he was late. Her smiling, pretending not to notice the perfume on his shirt. Her reaching for his hand after every argument, saying, "We'll be okay." And then that final moment, her lying on the hospital gurney, her eyes fluttering open, whispering his name, while he was looking at his phone, reading Victoria's message and choosing to walk away. Each memory wasn't just guilt. It was proof that she had loved him through everything, until he gave her nothing left to love. Daniel drove aimlessly that night, the city lights blurring into streaks across his windshield. He had nowhere to go. Victoria had shut down their accounts, his credit cards were blocked, and his penthouse door locks had already been changed. By midnight, he was parked on a quiet street outside a glass building. He hadn't meant to find it, but fate or guilt had guided him there. The illuminated sign above the door read, Harris Art and Hope Foundation. Through the large glass window he saw her. Elena. She was speaking to a small group of young artists, her posture gentle, her smile warm, her hair was tied back, her expression calm. She didn't look broken or bitter, she looked free. Daniel stared, his throat tightening. The same woman he'd once overlooked was now the center of a new world he could never enter. Inside, Elena finished her presentation. She placed a hand on one student's shoulder and said softly, "When something is taken from you, build something beautiful in its place." The words struck him like a blade. He pressed his hand against the steering wheel, his breath unsteady. "I just need to talk to her," he muttered. "She has to know I didn't mean for any of this to happen." But deep down, he knew she already understood. That was what made it hurt more. Her silence wasn't revenge, it was closure. A car passed, its headlights sweeping over his face, catching the tear he didn't bother to wipe away. He glanced again through the window. Elena was laughing with her staff now. Her joy looked real, the kind of peace he had always claimed to chase but never found. Daniel exhaled shakily, whispering to himself, "You win, Lena." He reached for his phone again, scrolling through their old messages, stopping at one she had sent years ago. Love doesn't ask for perfection, just effort. He stared at it until the screen dimmed. As he looked back toward the building, a movement caught his eye. Mr. Raines exiting through the side door, handing Elena a sealed envelope. She nodded, her expression serious this time. Daniel leaned forward, squinting through the rain-specked glass. He didn't know what it was, but he knew, with a sinking certainty, that his downfall was not the end of her story. It was just the beginning. The night was sharp with cold, the air filled with the hum of city lights and the low buzz of passing cars. Outside the Harris Art and Hope Foundation, a figure stood beneath the soft glow of the building sign, Daniel Harris. His hair was disheveled, his suit wrinkled from days of sleepless wandering. He clutched a single envelope in his hand, a notice of foreclosure, another reminder of how far he had fallen. Inside, through the glass doors, Elena was finishing her evening meeting. The room glowed warmly behind her, the soft laughter of her staff spilling into the quiet street. When she stepped out, her coat wrapped neatly around her shoulders, she didn't notice him at first. "Elena!" His voice broke through the silence. She stopped instantly, turning slowly. Her eyes found him, thinner, desperate, his confidence gone. For a long moment, neither spoke. The world seemed to still around them, the way it does when the past collides with the present. He stepped forward. "Please, don't walk away." Her face remained calm, unreadable. "You shouldn't be here, Daniel." He exhaled shakily, every word coming out rough and broken. "I didn't know what I was losing, Elena. I made a mistake. I thought I was building something better, but—" He stopped himself, choking back emotion. "But I lost everything. Victoria left. The company's gone. My name, my life, it's all gone." Her eyes softened for a fleeting moment, but her voice stayed steady. That's the problem, Daniel. You never looked long enough to know what you had. He took another step closer, his voice trembling. I thought success would fix everything. I thought if I made enough money, you'd be proud of me. You were always so calm, so patient. I didn't understand that. That was strength, not weakness. She looked at him quietly, her hands clasped in front of her. The streetlight reflected off her hair, giving her an almost ethereal calm. You chased validation, Daniel, not love. You wanted the world to see you, but you never saw me. He blinked, his breath visible in the night air. I see you now. No, she said softly. You see the consequences. He swallowed hard, guilt pooling in his chest like weight. Elena, please, I'm not asking you to take me back. His voice broke. I just want a chance to make things right. She stepped closer, close enough for him to see the sadness still lingering behind her strength. You can't rewrite what's already done. You made your choices, and I made mine. From her purse, she pulled out an envelope and held it out to him. He hesitated, then took it. What is this? Her voice was quiet, almost kind. Your closure. He opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a check, $10,000, and a stamped legal document. He read the first line aloud, his voice trembling. Final divorce decree. This is all you owe me, she said, and all I owe you. He looked up at her, disbelief and shame mixing in his eyes. You're giving me money. No, she said gently. I'm giving you peace. You once said love was about ownership. You were wrong. Love is about letting go before it destroys you. He stared at the check for a long moment, then back at her. You're not even angry. I was, she admitted softly. Until I realized anger keeps you tied to what broke you. I'd rather walk free. The wind brushed past them, carrying the faint sound of traffic and the hum of a new beginning. Daniel's eyes welled, but he refused to let the tears fall. You really don't feel anything anymore? Elena looked at him, her voice a whisper. I feel gratitude. You taught me what peace costs. Her eyes lingered on him one last time, not with bitterness, not even pity, but with understanding. Then she turned away, her heels clicking against the pavement as she walked back toward the lighted entrance. Daniel stood frozen, watching her figure disappear into the building. Through the glass, he saw her greeted by her staff, her laughter faint but real. It struck him. She had rebuilt herself from everything he had broken. He looked down at the envelope in his hand, his reflection staring back from the thin paper. The check trembled between his fingers, and for the first time, he understood what it meant to have nothing that money could buy. Goodbye, Lena, he whispered, voice cracking. As he turned to leave, headlights swept across the street, a black car pulling up quietly near the foundation. A man stepped out, sharp suit, calm presence. It was Mr. Raines. He handed an assistant a folder marked Hale Industries Settlement, Final Phase. The legal battle was over. The personal one had just found its closure. The applause filled the hall like soft thunder. Crystal lights shimmered above the crowd, and elegant music flowed through the air as people in gowns and suits mingled, laughing, clinking glasses, celebrating. Cameras flashed, capturing smiles and promises. At the center of it all stood Elena Harris, poised in a simple white gown, graceful, calm, radiant. Behind her, a banner stretched across the stage. Harris Art and Hope Foundation, rebuilding lives after loss. The same woman who once waited beside a cold dinner table now stood in a room built from the ashes of her past. The same heart that broke in silence was now the reason hundreds of women found new beginnings. A woman approached her. Samantha, a young widow in her early 30s, one of the foundation's first beneficiaries. Mrs. Harris, she said softly, her eyes full of gratitude. Because of this place, I found work again. I found myself again. Elena smiled warmly. You did that on your own. We just reminded you that your story wasn't over. The music swelled gently as Samantha stepped away, leaving Elena by the tall glass window overlooking the city. Outside, the sun was setting, golden light spilling across the skyline. The same kind of light that once filled her kitchen in scene 1, when love still felt simple. For a moment she stood there quietly, her reflection caught between the fading day and the rising night. Then her voice, calm, steady, full of quiet wisdom, began to narrate softly. He thought wealth made him powerful. But I learned power isn't in what you own. It's in what you can walk away from. Her eyes drifted toward a small table near the corner, a photo of her late father smiling beside her younger self. Next to it, a velvet box sat open. Inside lay her wedding ring. She picked it up one last time, holding it between her fingers. The gold glimmered under the soft light. A memory, nothing more. Her father's voice echoed faintly in her mind. True strength, Lena, isn't loud. It's the quiet that follows when you do the right thing. She smiled gently, closing her hand around the ring before placing it beside the photo. Thank you, Papa, she whispered, for teaching me how to let go. The crowd behind her began counting down, the gala's closing toast. Champagne glasses lifted, laughter filled the air, and applause rolled through the room again. Elena didn't turn around immediately. She stayed at the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The same horizon she once stared at through tears. Now it looked peaceful, whole. Mr. Raines approached quietly, his voice low and respectful. The settlement was finalized today, he said. Hale Industries has been dissolved. Their assets will fund the victims program, just as you requested. Elena nodded. Then it's done. Raines smiled. You kept your promise. I only kept my peace, she replied softly. The final notes of the orchestra played as Elena turned back toward the guests, her expression serene. The camera lingered on the photo and the ring side by side, symbols of what she'd lost and what she'd become. As the lights dimmed and the screen faded to black, her final words lingered in voiceover. Some endings don't need revenge, just truth, time, and the strength to start again.